Okay, our next animal, our next bird in the Avian Symposium. Very cool bird, very common bird, but really complex bird. Let's give it up for Miss Isabella Tovani, the American Crow.
Thank you. So I did my presentation on the American crow. Its scientific name is Corvus, and if anyone can pronounce that, please do try.
Brachyranchos.
That was closer than what I could get. I'm going to move on, but that was close. I couldn't do it. Okay, there we go. So, classification. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of Latin words, but these are them right here. Its kingdom is Animalia, which stands for animal, and the crow is an animal. Its phylum is Chordata, its class is Aves, which stands for bird, and we're all doing birds, so Aves is the only class that we can really have. Its order is Passeriformes, which is half of all birds. Its family is Oscine. Its genus is Corvus, which is mainly in the category of crows and ravens, and its species is the American crow. I didn't know if I was supposed to put the scientific name or just the name, so that's how that went. No good flying pictures.
Well, I couldn't copy and paste it.
Oh, okay. In characteristics of the male and female, they are almost identical, and one of the only ways you can tell if they're male or female is if you see the crow nesting on a nest, incubating eggs or watching over the chicks, because that's what the female does. The male will fly out and gather stuff, but that's later on in the presentation. The males are bigger than the females, and that's another characteristic, but it's very hard to tell unless they're right next to each other. They weigh 1 pound or 16 ounces, which is the same thing. Their size is usually from 17 to 19 inches, and their wingspan is from 33 to 36 inches, so they have pretty big wings. And their pelage is feathers, black. They're all black. They have no other color on them. Its distribution, well, I'm not sure if this is an accurate map or what is not, but from what I could gather is that crows are pretty adaptive creatures. They live almost all over the world, except for in Antarctica, New Zealand, and South America. Well, the southern part of South America. They live in most of the other parts. Not conservation. Sorry. Its habitat is open spaces. Now, except for deserts, because there's no really landing spaces for them to rest on, except for cacti. I think that's the plural form. But you don't really want to land on a cactus. That would hurt. They also live in agricultural fields. They help with the pests with the farmers, but they also eat the seeds, so good and bad with that one. They also live in coastal wetlands, marshes, rivers, and streams. Its conservation is of least concern, and as you can see, usually whenever you step outside, you see a crow or you hear one because they really are everywhere. And they're actually thriving, and they're increasing. So their numbers aren't steady, they're not dropping, they keep going up. It's a very small decline. As you can see, it's a lot of crows. But their numbers are slowly going up, so that's a good thing. And the reproduction. Now there are 2 slides on this because it's a rare sight, and the way that these birds do the mating process, it's more complex, and I couldn't fit it onto one slide with the text size that I was going for. So, as I said, the mating sister of crows is a rare sight and is only performed once prior to mating. The female chooses the male, which seems to be a reoccurring thing that happens with most birds. And the male shows off to the female first by showing his feathers. And then he bows and spreads his wings and his tail feathers, and he sings sort of a little song. Not sort of like, la sort of song, but you know, like what a crow would sound like, ka, ka. But, yeah. And then they groom each other's feathers, and they touch beaks, sort of like, kissing. Shows affection. They usually mate early, but some will wait till 2 years, which is usually the limit. for them for mating. And there's typically 3 eggs. I didn't write this down, but sometimes, as recorded, there can be up to 6 eggs, but the typical is 3. And with most of the nests, only 1/3 of the eggs will survive past the first year. The other 2/3 will usually not make it past that, which is sad. Now, the parental care for crows is it takes 6 days to lay the eggs, so they do it over a process of time, and then 19 days for incubation before they finally hatch. Now, the incubation is done by the female, while the male protects and gathers food, said here. And they're kind of the protector of the nest. They watch over everything. The hatchlings stay in the nest for 2 months, or until they can fly. The average is 2 months. And the male and the female, they both work together to care for the chicks. Chicks, crows, baby crows. That works. They live from 6 to 7 years in the wild, but in captivity, they'll live to 20 and sometimes even longer. The males and females live the same amount of years. There have been no recorded that the male or female live longer than the other. So that's that. And their seasonal patterns is that they'll fly down to warmer climates in the winter when it gets to be sort of cold, but it's not really migrating. They're going to warmer winter, but they don't fly great distances. They do not hibernate. They do not experience torpor. I don't know how you say that. And during different seasons, crows don't change behavior. They're always the same crows that are going to be flying around, picking up garbage. Them crows. Predators. Horned owls, eagles, falcons, red-tailed hawks. Those are the main predators of the American crow. And yes, there are actually 31 different types of crows. American is the kind I'm doing. Us, especially also. In the 1960s, it was not illegal to hunt crows, so their numbers actually were dropping quite quickly because they were being shot down so much as for sport. But in 1972, there was an act by federal law that protected crows, so now you cannot shoot them. But they still have certain seasons in some areas of the U.S. where you can hunt crows in certain seasons, like hunting crow seasons, but not many places do that. Oh, okay. Gosh. And their human relationships is that, yes, we once hunted them, but now they're sort of just everywhere. Some people consider them a nuisance or something annoying, like you'll be sitting in your bed, just hanging out, then all of a sudden you hear this big cawing outside, you're like, oh, crows. But scientists are actually working with crows, and they're trying to find ways to use them and put them to good use, like picking up garbage or other interesting things that you could have them do. Because they're actually quite intelligent creatures. Here are some interesting facts that I did not know prior to this. It turns out that murders, groups of crows are called murders. The reason why they're called this is because if one of the crows in a murder is hurt, injured, dying, sick, or they're going to die from that, the rest of the crows will usually kill that crow to put it out of its misery. And that's why it's called a murder. I did not know that, and I was like, okay, that's nice. And crows' brains are actually one of the largest brains for the mass of a bird out of all birds, which is why they're so smart. Crows can judge people based on their facial expressions and what their face looks like. So if you're just walking along the street and you're like, I have a ton of homework to do tonight, crows can tell what your expressions are. They know you're upset. I know, right? They can imitate our voice, much like a parrot can. But also said up here, down here, is that crows are smarter than a lot of other birds, and they're also smarter than parrots, which are smart, but crows are smarter, so they can also make their voice. They're very smart birds. Paris birds. And that's my work cited.
Good job, Bella.
And I couldn't get rid of this page, and I didn't know how to create a bunch of random pictures for you to just stare at.
I like the top middle.
I like the bottom middle one. The skies are really
Top
cool.
middle one is fat.
That's a baby.
Bella, don't be so judgmental. It's just baby fat.
And there's that. And I also have a video.
Yes.
Will we have enough time?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay.
Is it one like my crown?
No, Bella. You wish it was, but it's not. This one is a little bit more educational. I know you're like, oh, great, educational video. But
Oh, great.
it's actually pretty good. It's interesting. So I'm gonna just watch this. I'm gonna do that and hit play. It's not from YouTube. It's a little bit different. Can I hit play? Can I hit play? Can I hit play? You won't let me hit play. What's wrong with it? Aw. Now hit play. Let's see if it works. There we go.
How many of you have seen the Alfred Hitchcock film, The Birds? Yeah. Any of you get really freaked out by that? You might want to leave now. So this is a vending machine for crows, and over the past few days, many of you have been asking me, how did you come to this? How did you get started doing this? And it started as with many great ideas, or many ideas you can't get rid of anyway, at a cocktail party. About 10 years ago, I was at a cocktail party with a friend of mine, and we were sitting there, and he was complaining about the crows that he had seen that were all over his yard and making a big mess. And he was telling me that really we ought to try and eradicate these things. We got to kill them because they're making a mess. I said that was stupid. You know, maybe we should just train them to do something useful. And he said that was impossible. And I'm sure I'm in good company in finding that tremendously annoying when someone tells you it's impossible. So I spent the next 10 years reading about crows in my spare time. And after 10 years of this, my wife eventually said, look, you know, you've got to do this thing you've been talking about and build the vending machine. So I did. But part of the reason that I found this interesting is that I started noticing that we're very aware of all the species that are going extinct on the planet as a result of human habitation expansion. And no one seems to be paying attention to all the species that are actually living. They're surviving. And I'm talking specifically about synanthropic species, which are species that have adapted specifically for human ecology, species like rats and cockroaches and crows. And as I started looking at them, I was finding that they had hyper-adapted. They become extremely adept at living with us. And in return, we just tried to kill them all the time. And in doing so, we were breeding them for parasitism. We were giving them all sorts of reasons to adapt new ways. So, for example, rats are incredibly responsive breeders, and cockroaches, as anyone who's tried to get rid of them knows, have become really immune to the poisons that we're using. So I thought, let's build something that's mutually beneficial. Well, then let's build something that we can both benefit from and find some way to make a new relationship with these species. And so I built the vending machine. But the story of the vending machine is a little more interesting if you know more about crows. It turns out that crows aren't just surviving with human beings. They're actually really thriving. They're found everywhere on the planet except for the Arctic and the southern tip of South America. And in all that area, they're only rarely found breeding more than 5 kilometers away from human beings. So we may not think about them, but they're always around. And not surprisingly, given the human population growth, more than half of the human population is living in cities now, and out of those, 9/10 of the human growth population is occurring in cities. We're seeing a population boom with crows. So bird counts are indicating that we might be seeing up to exponential growth in their numbers. So that's no great surprise. But what was really interesting to me was to find out that the birds were adapting in a pretty unusual way. And I'll give you an example of that. So this is Betty. She's a New Caledonian crow. And these crows use sticks in the wild to get insects and whatnot out of pieces of wood. Here she's trying to get a piece of meat out of a tube. But the researchers had a problem. They messed up and left just a stick of wire in there. And she hadn't had the opportunity to do this before. You see, it wasn't working very well. So she adapted. Now this is completely unprompted. She had never seen this done before. No one taught her to bend this into a hook. No one had shown her how it could happen. But she did it all on her own. So keep in mind that she's never seen this done. Right. Yeah. All right. So that's the part where the researchers freak out. So it turns out we've been finding more and more that crows are really, really intelligent. Their brains are proportionate in the same proportion as chimpanzee brains are. There's all kinds of anecdotes for different kinds of intelligence they have. For example, in Sweden, crows will wait for fishermen to drop lines through holes in the ice, and when the fishermen move off, the crows fly down, reel up the lines, and eat the fish or the bait. It's pretty annoying for the fishermen. On an entirely different tack, at University of Washington, they a few years ago were doing an experiment where they captured some crows on campus. Some students went out and netted some crows, brought them in, weighed them and measured them and whatnot, and then let them back out again. And we're entertained to discover that for the rest of the week, these crows, whenever these particular students walked around campus, these crows would caw at them and run around and make their life kind of miserable. They were significantly less entertained when this went on for the next week and the next month and after summer break, until they finally graduated and left campus, and glad to get away, I'm sure, came back sometime later and found that crows still remembered them. So now, students at the University of Washington that are studying these crows do so with a giant wig and a big mask. It's fairly interesting. So we know that these crows are really smart, but the more I dug into this, the more I found that they actually have an even more significant adaptation.
Crows have become highly skilled at making a living in these new urban environments. In this Japanese city, they have devised a way of eating a food that normally they can't manage. Drop it among the traffic. The problem now is connecting the bits without getting run over. Wait for the lights to stop the traffic. Collect your cracked nut in
So it had the cars run over it, and then it it's not, that became their city.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So what's significant about this isn't that crows are using cars to crack nuts. In fact, that's old hat for crows. This happened about 10 years ago in a place called Sendai City at a driving school in the suburbs of Tokyo. And since that time, all the crows in the neighborhood are picking up this behavior. And now every crow within 5 kilometers is standing by a sidewalk waiting to collect its lunch. So they're learning from each other, and research bears this out. Parents seem to be teaching their young. They learn from their peers, they learn from their enemies. If I have a little extra time, I'll tell you about a case of crow infidelity that illustrates that nicely. The point being that they've developed cultural adaptation, and as we heard yesterday, that's the Pandora's box that's getting human beings in trouble, and we're starting to see it with them. They're able to very quickly and very flexibly adapt to new challenges and new resources in their environment, which is really useful if you live in a city. So we know that there's lots of crows. We found out they're really smart, and we found out that they can teach each other. And when all this came clear to me, I realized the only obvious thing to do is build a vending machine. So that's what we did. This is a vending machine for crows, and it uses Skinnerian training to shape their behavior over 4 stages. It's pretty simple. Basically what happens is that we put this out in a field or someplace where there's lots of crows, and we put coins and peanuts all around the base of the machine, and crows eventually come by and eat the peanuts and get used to the machine being there. And eventually they eat up all the peanuts, and then they see that there are peanuts here on the feeder tray, and they hop up and help themselves. And then they leave, and the machine spits up more coins and peanuts, and life is really dandy if you're a crow. Then you can come back anytime and get yourself a peanut. So when they get really used to that, we move on to the crows coming back. Now they're used to the sound of the machine, and they keep coming back and digging out these peanuts from amongst the pile of coins that's there. And when they get really happy about this, we go ahead and stymie them, and we move to the 3rd stage, where we only give them a coin. Now, like most of us who...
Sorry.
For something, they sweep things out of the way with their beak, and they do that here, and that knocks the coins down the slot. And when that happens, they get a peanut. And so this goes on for some time. The crows learn that all they have to do is show up, wait for the coin to come out, put the coin in the slot, and then they get their peanut. And when they're really good and comfortable with that, we move to the final stage, in which they show up and nothing happens. And this is where we see the difference between crows and other animals. Squirrels, for example, would show up, look for the peanut, go away. Come back, look for the peanut, go away. They do this maybe half a dozen times before they get bored, and then they go off and play in traffic. Crows, on the other hand, show up and they try and figure it out. They know that this machine's been messing with them through 3 different stages of behavior. They figure it's got to have more to it. So they poke at it and peck at it and whatnot, and eventually some crow gets the bright idea that, hey, there's lots of coins lying around from the first stage, lying around on the ground, hops down, picks it up, drops it in the slot, and then we're off to the races. That crow enjoys a temporary monopoly on peanuts until his friends figure out how to do it, and then there we go. So what's significant about this to me isn't that we can train crows to pick up peanuts. Mind you, there's $216 million worth of change lost every year, but I'm not sure I can depend on that ROI from crows. Instead, I think we should look a little bit larger. I think that crows can be trained to do other things. For example, why not train them to pick up garbage after stadium events, or find expensive components from discarded electronics, or maybe do search and rescue. The main point of all this for me is that we can find mutually beneficial systems for these species. We can find ways to interact with these other species that doesn't involve exterminating them, but involves finding an equilibrium with them that's a useful balance. Thanks very much.
And that be the end. Thank you for listening.
Questions for Isabella?
That picture. I think that was very explanatory. Yes.
What other animals are they most closely related to?
Well, mainly the raven. That's their closest relative. I'm not really sure of any other closely related relatives. I'll show them my light. Other than all the other species of crows, because.
What's the main difference between them and a raven?
Well. Sorry, I was thinking of a funny quote. What's the difference between a raven and a riding desk? Ravens are bigger than crows. They are also slightly more intelligent, but they're a lot more... When you think of a raven, you think of something a little bit more proud. They have a slight blue hint in their feathers that makes them a little bit more, royal looking. When you look at a crow, you're like, oh, they're everywhere. They're a little bit more mangy. That's why I like them. They're interesting.
And then, did I miss, did you talk about their diet? Did I miss that?
Yes, you did miss that. Let me find it.
Can you go to that slide on your presentation for me? Yeah, click on it. Don't look up.
Hold on. Oh, darn. I forgot to put that in. But I know what they eat.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, what they'll mainly eat is that they'll eat mice, they'll eat smaller animals, sometimes they'll eat smaller birds in them. And as you've seen crows, they'll fly around with pieces of garbage in their mouth. They're also scavengers, so they'll eat roadkill or they'll eat garbage that we leave out. They'll also eat seeds, nuts, fruits. They'll really eat just about anything. So yeah, crows eat anything.
I think I saw a couple hands over there.
Oh yeah, so on one of the slides it said that the crows were smarter than the parrot. Did it also say owl?
Yes. Even though owls are one of the crow's primary hunters, crows are smarter than owls. The only reason why owls are able to get crows is because they attack them during night. And they're bigger than crows, so
I thought there
they
was
overpower them.
Explanation about how they do something to get away from the owl.